Let's talk about this White Sox team. Plus 190 to win the division, 13-1 in the American League. They went 500 last year. And when I think about this team, I think of so much potential, but some injuries that have set them back. Are they finally going to take the next step this year?
Mike, Chelsa, what's going on? Good morning. Before I answer the question about the White Sox, I got to tell you, the alternative to cigarettes is marijuana. It's not going to guarantee rate. It's called Comiskey.
Let's go.
Make sure you guys do that. Mike, do not step foot in the city of Chicago and go to these games without calling me so that way I can be there with you and having these beers and a deep dish pizza in the summer. The reason why, how are you going to drink if you don't have a base, if you don't have some bread in there? You know, you got to be able to pound some beers and put some deep dish in that pizza. It's all a part of the summer process.
I got to tell you, man, I've already got the plan. I'm coming to Chicago. We're going to smoke a bowl. We're going to get so hungry. We're going to crush a pizza, and then we're going to watch the game. So the itinerary is already set.
Sounds like you're my best friend already, Mike. So regarding this White Sox team, I mean, extremely frustrating last year. I mean, right? Not only for fans, for the organization, but even bettors that were out there thinking this team was going to be one that could compete, and not even just for a World Series, but at least for their own division. And I think that was the most disappointing part of it all. It was a roller coaster ride. I mean, they literally hovered around 500 the entire season, and there were just certain things you could point to when looking at this team as to why they weren't as successful as they should have been. And I think first and foremost, at the top of the totem pole, you can just put Tony La Russa. And, you know, people often talk about that, you know, culture is an overstated word, and it doesn't mean as much as most think. But if you looked at this roster, if you looked at this team and what Tony La Russa did to it, just, you know, you got to be able to lift people up. You look at some of the best managers in the game, and that's what they do. I mean, you know, they get the best out of their players. And this year, I think Pedro Grifol can do just that. I think he's a great leader, a great communicator. And when he also has the ability to talk to a lot of the Latino players that are on the team, getting the best out of them. So it's going to be interesting to see what this team can do. I genuinely do feel that they'll be a tick better than last year. I'm not necessarily putting all my eggs in the basket, assuming that they'll win the AL Central or even get upwards of 88 victories on the season. But I'm excited to see what they can do for sure.
I think that's the problem with the White Sox. From a betting standpoint, you usually aren't getting value on the White Sox because you look at their lineup and they have so much talent. They should be good. It didn't connect last year, but this year they are right behind the Guardians plus 190 to win the Central. Like, do you think that's a bet you would make? Because I will say, like, maybe it's a buy low spot for the White Sox after, you know, the disaster that, not a disaster, but like a season where they underperformed. Do you think there's any value on plus 190 the White Sox to win their division?
Mike, Chelsea, I got to be very honest. I mean, I'm a huge White Sox fan, right? More so than the Cubs, and it pains me to say that I would never lay that money down on the White Sox, just because I wouldn't. It's like I wouldn't want my heart to break into a million pieces, knowing that I've been rooting for this team that I love so much the entire year, and then they lose me some money as well. That's why I wouldn't do that. But you're right. I mean, it is a good buy low spot if you're thinking further, right? If you're to say, you know what, if you do think they're going to win the AL Central, then you're probably better off putting some money on them to win the AL, just because you know, you're only a couple of series away from doing so, and I'm sure the numbers bump up significantly. So that's somewhere that I would be. And the only reason I say that is because, you know, it's health. Chelsea, can Eloy Jimenez play more than the 84 games that he did last season? Can Luis Robert Jr. Play more games than he did last year, than the 98 he played last year? You know, you're not going to have a Jose Abreu, a guy that led the team in damn near every stat last year. So who's going to replicate those statistics for them? So those are the things that concern me when it comes to the team. And then even just the back half of the rotation. Can Giolito have a bounce-back season, or is he going to be who we saw last year? You have no Johnny Cueto eating up innings at the back half of that rotation. Those are the small things that concern me. And then the last one is, you know, the White Sox are not going to make a significant move come trade deadline or the middle of the season. So what you see is what you're going to get, and I'm not necessarily sure I'm willing to bet that, especially if it's just 190.
We're talking to Gabe Ramirez, host on 670 The Score in Chicago, weekend host on the BetQL Network, and follow him on Twitter at Chicago_Gabe. Gabe, I know this is a really generic question to ask, but are these guys ever going to stay healthy? Because I feel like year after year, there's some sort of injury to a big name player or two on that roster that really decimates this team.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, and you could even go like deep into the roster to look at injuries that affect this team. A guy like Jake Berger, someone that people thought extremely highly of. They thought he might be able to plug him into that third base role. And so far this spring training, in 4 games, he has 2 home runs, right? He's a masher. He's a guy that can really help the squad. Because last year, they didn't have one guy that hit over 20 home runs. And obviously, that had a lot to do with injuries as well. But, I mean, it's guys like that, right? And then, I mean, when you're looking at Luis Robert and Eloy, obviously 2 guys that you're really looking for, and Yohan Moncada for that matter, to stay healthy, it's about their positioning, right? And that's why it's good, kind of good that Jose Abreu is gone, because it allows Eloy to spend more time in that DH role and not necessarily stretch his legs as much in the outfield, where he was getting injured more often than not. Luis Robert, the same thing. There are capable guys. Like when you look at Andrew Benintendi, he can take some of the pressure off of Luis Robert Jr. in center field to give him some days off. And that's what these gentlemen need. It's just an opportunity to rest their legs. When you're looking at Andrew Vaughn, who's going to be leaned on for a lot of the offensive production for this White Sox team, he never played the outfield, and he had a ton of games in left last season, and now with Jose Abreu gone, he'll be able to save his legs, work out of the first base position, and then, you know, hopefully maintain health there. But you're right, Mike. It sucks to watch this team and think that they're headed somewhere, and then they just get decimated by the injury bug year after year.
Well, I mean, it's not specific to just the White Sox. Like, we see it already happening where Joe Musgrove, you know, dropped a kettlebell on his toe in spring training. But circling back to the White Sox, there is one bright spot. Well, there's other bright spots, but Dylan Cease, second in the Cy Young voting last year. He's 8-1, the third favorite to win it this year. Do we expect another big season from Dylan Cease?
I think you have to. If you look at the makeup of Dylan Cease, he is a no-nonsense, get the ball and throw it type pitcher, and he's just gotten better year after year. So when you're looking at the upper echelon of pitchers in Major League Baseball, he has to be a part of that conversation. I think he's looking to prove that it wasn't some one-year wonder. I think he wants to show everyone the same way that he showed this White Sox organization that he is extremely capable of being an ace at the top of the rotation. I know the Cubs are kicking themselves, Chelsa, for trading him away to the White Sox for nothing. So along with Eloy Jimenez in that one particular trade. So I think that, you know, for that matter, I think he's someone that can compete. Last year, I laid $50 on his future to win the Cy Young early in the season, like in July. And I had plenty of conversations with Ben Verlander, Justin's brother, who works for the MLB Network. And, you know, him and I would just go back and forth because I thought Dylan Cease was a lock to win it. And I thought Justin Verlander would fall off a cliff at some point. But he found the fountain of youth and ended up winning that thing. But, you know, he's a year older. Dylan Cease is someone that is somewhat coming into his own and trying to prove again that he can pitch those 200 innings. And, I mean, he was 14-8 last year with a crap team, Chelsea. So the hope is that, you know, he'll put together a couple more victories. He had 227 strikeouts last year. He's going to build off of that. So it's just a matter of limiting walks. He did give up a ton of those last year. But if he can get a couple more victories, stick with the same strikeout rate, I think he could have. I think it's worth a shot to sprinkle some money on Dylan Cease to win the Cy Young.
Gabe, just a couple minutes remaining here in this segment, but wanted to get your quick take on the Bears because I know you cover them as well. What are they going to do with that number 1 pick?
Yeah.
The Bears.
I mean, that's like you can go. I can go anywhere. I can go to the fruteria on the corner store. I can go to pick up my daughters from daycare, and somebody's going, "Hey, what are the Bears going to do with the number 1 pick?" It's like the number one thing the city is talking about. And to me, it's very simple, Mike. It is trade the number 1 pick to the Texans before the draft starts. Get yourself some easy draft capital that, you know, to allow that team to move to number 1, so that way the Texans can put out there in the PR world who they are going to take with the number 1 pick, so that way it won't be surprised. Therefore, the few quarterbacks that remain, the Will Levis, the Anthony Richardson, the C.J. Stroud that are out there, the remaining teams that are looking for quarterback help, then they can battle, fight, claw over each other to get to the Bears' number 2 pick, which would then allow the Bears to trade down for a second time, accumulating a ton of draft capital. So if it were me, it would be an early trade to the Texans, a secondary trade, hopefully to the Colts, so that way you can still secure the services of one of the top 2 defenders and Will Anderson Jr. and Jalen Carter. Because I think if you go past 4, if you're the Bears, you're going to lose the press conference. I think those 2 names, Carter and Anderson, have just been floating around the Chicago sports landscape so much over the course of the last 2 months that anybody outside of those two, it will be a poor consolation prize. So the double trade down, Mike and Chelsa, that's what I'm hoping for.
He is a host on 670 The Score in Chicago, weekend host on the BetQL Network as well, and I'm going to hit him up when I make that trip this summer. It is Gabe Ramirez. Gabe, we appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Hey, weed legal in Chicago now, so I'll be looking for that phone call.
All right, my man.
All right, guys, have a good one.